Hello everyone, what is going on? Raven here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a man by the name of William George Heirens. I'm going to call him William, okay? Now, who was this man? He is a criminal and possible serial killer who confessed under police torture and was subsequently controversially convicted of 3 murders in 1946. He was called the Lipstick Killer after a notorious message scrawled in lipstick at a crime scene. At the time of his death, he was reportedly Illinois' longest-serving prisoner. He spent 65 years in prison. Now, well, what were the murders? First murder that we're going to talk about in this video today is the woman named Josephine Ross. On June 5th, 1945, 43-year-old Josephine Ross was found dead in her Chicago apartment. She had been repeatedly stabbed. Her head was wrapped in a dress. Dark hairs were clutched in hand. No valuables were taken from her apartment. Police were unable to identify a dark-complexioned man reportedly seen loitering nearby or running away. The next one was Frances Brown. On December 10th, 1945, Frances Brown was discovered with a knife lodged in her neck and bullet wound to the head in her apartment. Nothing was taken, but a message was written in lipstick on the wall. Quote unquote, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Police found a bloody fingerprint smudged on the door jamb of the entrance door. A witness heard gunshots at about 4 a.m. and the building's night clerk said a nervous man of 35 to 40 years old, weighing about 140 pounds, got off the elevator and left. At one point, Chicago police said they had reason to believe the killer was a woman. Next victim, Suzanne Degnan. On January 7, 1946, 6-year-old Suzanne Degnan was discovered missing from her first-floor bedroom in Edgewater, Chicago. Police found a ladder outside her window and a ransom note. "Get $20,000 ready and wait for my word. Do not notify the FBI or police. Bills are in 5s and 10s. Burn this for her safety." A man repeatedly called the Degnan residence demanding the ransom. Chicago Mayor Edward Kelly received a note. "This is to tell you how sorry I am not to get to old Degnan instead of this girl. Roosevelt and the OPA made their own laws. Why shouldn't I?" and a lot more. At the time, there was a nationwide meatpackers strike, and the Office of Price Administration, or OPA, was talking of extending rationing to dairy products. Degnan was a senior OPA executive recently transferred to Chicago. Another executive of the OPA had been recently assigned armed guards after receiving threats against his children, and in Chicago, a man involved with the black market meat had recently been murdered by decapitation. Police considered the possibility of the Degnan killer was a meat packer. Acting on an anonymous tip, police discovered Degnan's head in a sewer block from the Degnan house, her right leg in a catch basin, her torso in another storm drain, and her left leg in another drain. Her arms were found a month later in another sewer. Blood was found in the drains of laundry tubs in the basement laundry room of a nearby apartment building. Police questioned hundreds of people, gave polygraph examinations to about 170, and several times claimed to have captured the killer, though all were eventually released. The coroner fixed the time of death between 12:30 and 1 a.m. and stated that a very sharp knife had been used to expertly dismember the body. A basement laundry room near the Degnan's home was located in which it appeared that Degnan had been dismembered, though it was determined that she was already dead when she was taken there. A coroner's expert stated that the killer was either a man who worked in a profession that required the study of anatomy or one with a background in dissection. Not even the average doctor could be as skillful. It had to be a meat cutter. The coroner added that it was a very clean job with absolutely no signs of hacking. So, they arrested a man named Hector Verber. He was 65 years old. He was a janitor in the building where Degnan lived, was arrested and touted as a suspect. Police told the press, "This is the man," despite discrepancies between his profile and one that was developed by them as to what kind of skills the killer had, including him having surgical knowledge or at least being a butcher. Police cited such evidence as him frequenting the so-called murder room, and the grimy state of the ransom note suggested it was written by a dirty hand such as that of a janitor. The police pressured his wife to implicate her husband in the murder. They held him for 48 hours, asked questions. They even beat him, severely injured him, including a separated shoulder. Throughout, he denied involvement in the murder. He was released on a writ of habeas corpus, which, if you don't know what that means, a writ of habeas corpus is a recourse in law through which a person can report an unlawful detention or imprisonment to a court and request that the court order the custodian of the person, such as a prison official, to bring the prisoner to court to determine whether the detention was lawful. He talks about his experience, saying, they hanged me up, they blindfolded me, I can't put up my arms, they are sore. They had handcuffs on me for hours and hours. They threw me in the cell and blindfolded me. They handcuffed my hands behind my back, pulled me up on the bars until my toes touched the floor. I had no food. I'd go to the hospital. I am so sick. Any more I would have confessed to anything. He spent 10 days in the hospital. It was determined that Verbeau, a Belgian immigrant, couldn't write English well enough, even by the crude standards of the ransom note. He sued successfully the Chicago Police Department for $15,000, and his wife received $5,000. So another notable false lead was that of a person named Sidney Sherman, a recently discharged Marine who had served in World War II. Police had found blonde hairs in the back of the Degnan apartment building, and nearby was a wire that authorities suspected could have been used as a garrote to strangle Suzanne Degnan. Near that was a handkerchief the police suspect might have been used as a gag to keep her quiet. On the handkerchief was a laundry mark named S. Sherman. The police hoped that perhaps the killer had erred in leaving it behind, or erred. They searched military records and discovered that Sidney Sherman lived at the Hyde Park YMCA. The police went to question Sherman, but discovered that he had vacated the residence without checking out and quit his job without picking up his last paycheck. A nationwide manhunt ensued. He was found 4 days later in Toledo, Ohio. He explained under interrogation that he had eloped with his girlfriend and denied that the handkerchief was his. He was administered a polygraph test, which he passed and was later cleared. The handkerchief's real owner, Airman Seymour Sherman, New York City, was eventually found. He had been out of the country when Suzanne Degnan was murdered. He had no idea how it possibly ended up in Chicago, and the presence of the handkerchief was determined to be a coincidence. So there's lack of progress. I mean, by the time that they did all this, this is just ridiculous. In February of 1946, her arms were found by sewer workers about half a mile from her home after her remains have already been interred, which means she was either buried or cremated. By April, some 370 suspects have been questioned and cleared. They got another confession by a man named Richard Russell Thomas, who was a nurse living in Phoenix, Arizona, had moved from Chicago. He was imprisoned in Phoenix for molesting one of his own daughters, but he was in Chicago at the time of the murder. A handwriting expert from the Phoenix Police Department first informed Chicago authorities of the great similarities between Thomas's handwriting and that one of the Degnan ransom note, noting that many of the phrases Thomas used in an extortion note were similar, and his medical training as a nurse matched the profile suggested by police. Although Thomas lived on the south side, he frequented a car yard directly across the street from where Suzanne Degnan's arms were found. During questioning by Chicago police, he freely admitted to killing Suzanne. However, the authorities were intrigued by a promising new suspect reported to the paper the same day. The Thomas development broke. A college student was caught fleeing from the scene of a burglary, brandishing a gun at police, and possibly tried to kill one of the pursuing policemen to escape. Thomas had recanted his confession, but the press didn't notice in light of this new lead. So then at this point, they arrested and questioned Heirens, the man that was, put in prison for this. They gave the man a polygraph test. It was rescheduled several days later after they found him to be in too much pain to cooperate. I'm going to back up for a second here. On June 26, 1946, William was 17 years old when he was arrested for attempted burglary. According to him, he drifted into unconsciousness under questioning and was interrogated under the clock for 6 consecutive days. He was beaten and starved. He was not allowed to see his parents for 4 days. He was also refused the opportunity to speak to a lawyer for 6 days. 2 psychiatrists, Dr. Heirens and Roy Grinker, gave him sodium pentothal without a warrant and without his parents' or his consent, and interrogated him for 3 days. Under the influence of the drug, authorities claimed that he spoke of an alternate personality named George, who had actually committed the murders. He claimed that he recalled little of the drug-induced interrogation, and when police asked for George's last name, he said he couldn't remember, but that it was the murmuring name. Police translated this to a merman, and the media later dramatized it to be the quote-unquote murder man. What Heirens actually said in his dispute, as the original transcript has disappeared. In 1952, Dr. Greensker revealed that he never implicated himself in any of the killings. On his 5th day in custody, he was given a lumbar puncture without anesthesia. Ugh. Moments later, he was driven to police headquarters for a polygraph test. This is where I was at. They tried for a few minutes to administer the test, but they rescheduled because he was in too much pain to cooperate. Well, yeah, you gave him a lumbar puncture without anesthesia. Of course he's going to be in pain. Even if you gave him anesthesia, when he comes from that, he's going to be in pain. That is in the spine. Oh my lord. When the polygraph was administered, authorities, including State Attorney William Tuohy, announced that the results were inconclusive. On July 2nd, 1946, he was transferred to the Cook County Jail, where he was placed in the infirmary to recover. After the sodium pentothal questioning, but before the polygraph exam, he spoke to Captain Michael Ahern, with State's Attorney William and a stenographer at hand. He offered an indirect confession, confirming his claim was while under sodium pentothal that his alter ego, George Merman, might have been responsible for the crimes. That George, quote-unquote, which happens to be his father's first name and Heirens' middle name, had given him the loot to hide in his dormitory room. Police hunted all over for this quote-unquote George, questioning his known friends, family associations, but came away empty-handed. He was attributing as saying while under the influence that he met George when he was 13 years old, that it was George who sent him out prowling at night, that he robbed for pleasure, killed like a cobra, and cornered. George related his secrets to Heirens. He allegedly claimed that he was always taking the rap for George. First for petty theft, then assault, and now murder. Psychologists explained at the time that in the same way children make up imaginary friends, he made up this personality to keep his antisocial feelings and actions separate from the person who could be the quote-unquote average son and student, date nice girls, and go to church. Authorities were skeptical regarding his claims and suspected that he was laying the groundwork for an insanity defense. But the confession earned widespread publicity, with the press transforming Merman to quote-unquote murder man. While handwriting analysis did not definitely link his handwriting to the lipstick message, police claimed that his fingerprints matched a print discovered at the scene of the Frances Brown murder. It was first reported as a bloody smudge on the door jamb, which I mentioned earlier. Furthermore, a fingerprint on the left little finger also allegedly connected him to the ransom note with 9 points of comparison. As his 9 points of comparison were loops, this could also provide a match of 65% of the population. At the time, his supporters pointed out that the FBI handbook regarding fingerprint identification required 12 points of comparison. On June 30th, 1946, Captain Emmett Evans told newspapers that he had been cleared of suspension in the Brown murder. The fingerprint left in the apartment was not his. 12 days later, Chief of Detectives Walter Storms confirmed that the bloody smudge that was left on the drawer jamb was indeed his. Now, his defense attorneys actually felt he was guilty. Their task, they believed, was to save him from the electric chair. Tuohy, on the other hand, was not certain he could get a conviction. The small likelihood of a successful murder prosecution of William early prompted the state's attorney's office to seek out and obtain the cooperative help of defense counsel, and through them, that of their client. All the prosecution had in the Dignan case was a partial fingerprint on the ransom note. And it was at this stage of the investigation that defense counsel moved forward in cooperation with the state attorney's office. William took full responsibility for the 3 murders on August 7, 1946. The prosecution had him reenact the crime in the Dignan home in public and in front of the press. On September 4th, with his parents and the victims' families attending, and Chief Justice Harold G. Ward presiding, he admitted his guilt on the burglary and murder charges. That night, William tried to hang himself in his cell, timed to coincide during a shift change of the prison guards. He was discovered before he died. He said later that despair drove him to attempt suicide. This is something he has said. Everyone believed I was guilty. If I weren't alive, I felt I could avoid being adjudged guilty by the law and thereby gain some victory. But I wasn't successful even at that. Before I walked into the courtroom, my counsel told me to just enter, plead guilty, and keep my mouth shut afterward. I didn't even have a trial. On September 5th, after further evidence was run into the record, the prosecution defense had made their closing statements. Ward formally sentenced him to 3 life terms. As William waited to be transferred to Stateville Prison from the Cook County Jail, Sheriff Michael Mulcahy asked William if Suzanne suffered when she was killed. This was his answer. I can't tell you if she suffered, Sheriff. I didn't kill her. Tell Mr. Dignan to please look after his other daughter, because whoever killed Suzanne is still out there. Within days of his confession in open court, William denied any responsibility for the murders. Mary Jane Blanchard, daughter of murder victim Josephine Ross, was one of the first dissenters, being quoted in 1946 saying, "I cannot believe that young William murdered my mother. He just does not fit into the picture of my mother's death. I've looked at all the things William stole, and there was nothing of my mother's things among them." What do you guys think of this case? Make sure that you all let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think he is innocent? Do you think he's guilty? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!